Hello students, Mr. Bastias here. Welcome to Unit 5, Week 3, Day 2. Make sure you have your meaning mapper, article a day, your book of knowledge, and paper and pencil to write with. Today we will continue to learn about natural changes and habitats of living things. Let's get started. Observe this image closely. Share 3 facts to describe the ecosystem in the image. Pause the video and take a moment to do this now. Here are the 3 facts I wrote down. Sunlight gives trees and plants energy. Frogs are amphibians. We learned this from one of our previous article days. Fungi are decomposers. Fungi break down dead matter. I want you to think of our focus word, ecosystem. Look at each picture and ask yourself, is this a good example of the word ecosystem? If you agree, drag it to the left. If you don't, drag it to the right. Let's look at the first image. Is this a good example of an ecosystem? Yes, it is, because it includes plants and animals that all live together and survive because of each other. In this case, giraffes. How about this picture? Is this a good example of an ecosystem? No, it's a great example of some eyeglasses, but not an ecosystem. How about this next one? Nope, that's a backpack. And this last one, is this an ecosystem? Yes, it is an ecosystem. An ecosystem is made up of plants and animals that all live in the same environment. Here, we don't see a lot of animals, but we can assume they're there. Let's get started with our article a day. Natural changes to the environment. Look at the image. What do you see? I see on the left, we have some very dry land, and on the right, we have some grass. Let's get started with our article. These may look like normal rocks, but they're not. There was a forest ecosystem here about 200 million years ago when some of the first dinosaurs roamed the earth. These rocks are actually pieces of prehistoric trees. Look at these. It says they look like rocks, but they're not rocks. Let's see what the caption says. These rocks are actually pieces of prehistoric trees. They are very old, ancient trees. Back then, there were producers, consumers, and decomposers too. Fossils found in the Petrified Forest showed that there were swamp plants like ferns. There were also dinosaurs that looked sort of like crocodiles. In prehistoric times, there were plants, almost like ferns, like this plant here, and there were dinosaurs that looked like a crocodile, like this dinosaur here. At some point, the area was flooded by huge amounts of water and mud. The trees were covered. Here, we see an image of a flooded forest. This is what it looked like about 200 million years ago when the forest flooded. The entire forest was destroyed along with the food chain. All that mud covering the trees dried. Eventually, this water became mud and dried. Over millions of years, the mud turned to rock. Instead of rotting, the trees turned to rock too. So, first, we had a forest that flooded. Then it turned into dry mud, and then eventually, after a long time, it turned into petrified wood. And that's how we can have the petrified forest. Millions of years and countless floods later, the land in Petrified Forest National Park has eroded. We are left with this strange landscape. It is still called a forest, but many of the trees are really rocks. This is the Petrified Forest National Park. You can see these rocks aren't actually rocks. They're pieces of petrified wood. The land is almost like a desert. However, the petrified forest does get some rain. There's actually a lot happening in this ecosystem, even though it looks like a dry, sandy place. If we look at the petrified forest, it looks like there aren't a lot of animals there or anything, but there's actually a lot of life there. There are 500 different species of plants in Petrified Forest National Park. There are no dinosaurs, but there are little lizards. There are also toads, snakes, birds, and jackrabbits. In the Petrified Forest, we have snakes, toads, lizards, birds, and jackrabbits. Coyotes are near the top of the food chain. They eat just about anything, meat and plant alike. A coyote is almost like a dog. Here it is, we have a coyote right here. As the caption says, coyotes are near the top of the food chain in the Petrified Forest. The Petrified Forest is interesting because it shows how nature's forces can change the landscape. When the land changes, the ecology changes. There were once forests and swamps here. Now it is a rocky desert. The petrified wood forest shows how an environment can change. First, from a swamp or a forest, then to a rocky desert. The hills have eroded. Much of the rich soil has been washed away, leaving mostly sand and rocks, but it is still an ecosystem. Through all the changes, there has always been life here. Living things find a way to adapt and survive. So whether it looks like this or like this, it's still an ecosystem where animals live and survive because of each other. Please take out your book of knowledge. Write down 2 or 3 things you learned from the article and would like to remember. Pause the video and do so now. I'm going to go back to the article to find information that I can write down in my book of knowledge. The first thing I learned is that the rocks are actually pieces of prehistoric trees. I'm going to write that down. I learned that the rocks in the Petrified Forest are actually prehistoric trees. I also learned that toads, snakes, birds, and jackrabbits live in the prehistoric forest. I also learned that toads, lizards, birds, and jackrabbits live in the petrified forest. This makes me think of the desert because it said that the petrified forest is like a desert. This makes me think of the desert. This makes me think of the desert because the petrified forest is like a desert. Now, please take out your meaning mapper. In the middle, we have our focus word ecosystem, which is the community of plants and animals that all live in the same environment and survive because of each other. We've already added community and environment, but what else could you add to your meaning mapper that relates to the word ecosystem? I added the word plant because an ecosystem is made up of the plants and animals that all live in the same environment. And that's it for me, students. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.